Hi, my name is Kyle Sandler, and I'm the Education Coordinator for the Enfield Shaker Museum. Thank you for tuning in to another installment of our online Tuesday tour series. Today we're going to be looking at shaker basements around the museum's grounds. And we're going to start with the Greystone Dwelling basement. Construction began on the Greystone Dwelling in 1837. The first major project was to dig out this massive foundation of the building. The Greystone Dwelling is sort of a unique building. They hire an outside architect named Amy Burnham Young, who does the design of the structure and really focuses on the engineering required to make this building happen. And there's also a master mason named Luther Kingsley who comes up from the Boston area. And Luther is going to supervise the massive amount of masonry work that goes into this stone and brick structure. Now, the basement's a really interesting space. There's over 4,500 square feet of working space down here. We only know a fraction of the use of the different rooms in the basement of the Greystone Dwelling. One of the most interesting rooms we'll go into in just a second is behind me, but if you look at this wall here, this is one of the massive chimney bases you find in the Greystone Dwelling basement. This structure had 8 chimneys, and these chimney bases were also used to support larger structures above them. In the case of this chimney base, just above us would have been the bake ovens for the Shaker sisters used. And just across the hallway from us is an even larger chimney base that would have supported a central cast iron range in the kitchen of the Greystone Dwelling. Now, if you look over here, one interesting detail is there is some finishing in this basement. You have a plaster mortar covering on this brick wall here, and if you look up just a little bit, you're going to see a lot of plumbing, but if you look up here, you actually have a lath and plaster finish ceiling. Today it's currently over 90 degrees in New Hampshire, and this basement is exceptionally comfortable. It stays roughly around 55 degrees year-round, and so it's a great space for storage. So certainly the Shaker sisters would have stored foodstuffs down here. A couple of years ago we finished a project where we actually discovered that there was a dumbwaiter system that would have had access from the basement to the pantry and the kitchen. And so the Shaker sisters would have been able to use that dumbwaiter system to gain greater access to things like heavy bags of, say, potatoes, making this an even more efficient space. Now, just behind us is the smoke room. If you look down here, you can see the little smoker oven. And so you would have built a fire in this space here. There's a hole that would have vented it into the room directly behind us, which we'll visit again just in a second. One other interesting detail about the basement of the Greystone Dwelling is the stone floor. One shaker named Hervey Elkins writes this great account in the early 1850s, and he describes the floor here as irregular polygons of argillicious slate. And so that's what you see. You see this very fine slate that they would have found in the hills across from the Enfield church family, and it's a very high quality stone that you see throughout most of the basements at the Enfield Shaker Museum. We're now in the smoke room in the basement of the Greystone Dwelling. This is really one of the most interesting spaces in the building. You can picture the large amount of meats that could have been smoked in this room. And if you look just beside me, you can see the blackening of the brick over time from the use of this room. And if you look up at the ceiling, you can see these large granite blocks. And these would have supported the bake ovens upstairs, but you can also see how the granite has blackened over time, just like the brickwork in this room. The most important feature in the Greystone Dwelling from an engineering perspective are these long walls behind me. There's 2 parallel walls that run most of the length of the Greystone Dwelling. And what these do is they provide support for the very large open broad hallways above us. The walls themselves are made from granite blocks. There's a thin bead of lime mortar, and you have this brick facade on each of the arches, which is a nice design feature. And if you look down the walls, you'll see arches of varying sizes. And the location of these arches roughly corresponds to the open space in the rooms above us. And so the small arch behind me would correspond to one of the smaller rooms in the building, where the larger arches you just saw correspond to the larger spaces. And so to get the entire span of the meeting room on the second floor of this building, it takes these 2 large arches and then 2 of the smaller arches. And that gives you the actual dimensions of that room. Welcome back. Now we're at the Brethren's East Shop. This building was constructed in 1819 and has a really interesting side basement entrance. We're actually on the east side of the structure, and if you look at this door closely, you have this wonderful metal arched roof. This is a really unique feature that was often found in Shaker villages. In Enfield, this is used for the roof at the dairy at the second family, and it's also used as a cover on various wells around the property. There's a really famous shot of 2 boys at a well, and you see the same type of arched style. And so when this building was restored to its circa 1880 exterior appearance, this was also restored to look as this entrance would have originally. So if you press this patent latch right here, this door and the door next to it open up, giving you a wonderful access point to the basement.
Keep going.
Now we're in the basement of the Brethren's East Shop, and we're in one of the side rooms off of a main center hall. And this room's kind of interesting because you can really see the foundation of this building. One thing that's unusual that I think is really interesting about the 2 Brethren shops is they have much deeper basements than what you would have expected from the outside. And here you can see the foundation made from granite blocks. You can see how they liberally use mortar, usually a lime-based mortar, in between the stones here. And then at the top you have these nice smooth dressed capstones that form the upper part of the foundation. Now just above the capstones, it's a little hard to see, is the actual wooden sill of the building. And in that sill, you're going to rest the massive timbers that actually hold up the floor of the first level of this structure. Now if you look around at this side of the room, you can see that the interior rooms in the Brethren's East Shop basement are made from brick. It's unusual. You do not have stone walls down here, you do not have wooden walls, but you have this beautifully done brickwork as the interior structure. Another interesting part of the Brethren's East Shop basement are the chimney bases. There's 2 chimney bases on this level of the building. They were largely used for storage. That was fairly common even outside of Shaker villages in most vernacular structures of the time. But what I like about this opening to the chimney base here is in order to be able to frame in wood and have a door hanging, there are these little wooden bricks. There's one at the top and one down the bottom. They blend in seamlessly. The only way you'd actually know it was wood is if you come over and you give it a nice tap. You can hear the sound of wood versus the stone. We're now in the north central room of the Brethren's East Shop basement, and this room is kind of interesting. It's a little bit different than one of the last rooms we were in. Just on the wall over here you can see the stone foundation of the building, but just behind me is a brick wall that has actually had a whitewash of mortar put over it. This room at some point in Shaker history seems to have been a more finished space with this white lime wash to protect this space. So what was this room used for? Like many of the other basement spaces at the Enfield Shaker Museum, we really don't know. We have a lot to learn. And so we're always actively looking for research. And one of the great things about doing preservation work on the site is we're often discovering new things that we didn't know about this building and other buildings on the site. We're now at the 1854 cow barn. The cow barn was designed to be a multi-layered work environment with everything from the top drive down to the cattle stanchions on the ground level where we're standing right now as a very efficient work environment. And one thing that is really interesting about this cow barn is it had a full basement, which is really not that common with other barns at the time. One of the reasons that they were able to have a full basement on this barn is this was actually once a gentle sloping ravine. And right in the middle of the ravine, they actually built this barn, which allowed them a certain amount of access to the landscape in order to build this lower level. Now, if you look down this way, we only have one photograph of where the door to the barn was. It's about halfway down the north side. it would have entered into a subterranean level, and in that level there would have been a series of manure pits. The cattle would have been on this level, manure would have been shoveled through a series of trapdoors into this subterranean level. On that level in these manure pits, they would have been lined with wooden planks. Below the planks you had a layer of clay which would have helped to filter it and keep it intact so that it could be used for agriculture in the fields. Unfortunately, we no longer have access to the basement of this building, but it would be a fascinating exploration to try to learn more about this space. Thank you for tuning in to this installment of our Online Tuesday Tour series. Thank you for your ongoing support, and we look forward to welcoming you back to the museum in the future. For more information on Enfield Shaker Museum, please visit our website at shakermuseum.org.